Alright, so another video. This one is going to get you thinking about writing article summaries, which is a big block of the work we do up front. Again, the vision with these article summaries, and they're one page, single space, according to a template I provided you with, is that they become the building blocks for your literature review. And your literature review is a significant portion. With the introduction, it's more than half of the actual paper you're writing. So the idea is it's like spoon feeding. You do the individual sections in the article summaries, and those then move into or migrated into your literature review, and parts of the article summaries can also go into other sections like the analysis and the synthesis. But overall, it makes the writing process, in theory, easier, because you won't be just staring at a blank page. You'll be working from an existing page and migrating the information over. Previous iterations of this class have had good success using this system. So I'm going to go through it step by step, and just point to some of the problems students have previously had on this assignment. I think what I can do is just shoot in on the page itself on my computer. Like that. So obviously you're going to put the title of the article up here. That's easy enough. You know what the title of your article is. Get the authors right. I check it. Get the year right. Here is a place where people sometimes run into issues. Journals. The names of journals. For whatever reason, I don't quite know how people do this. They sometimes put in the name of the publisher when what they mean to put in is the name of the journal. So in this case, the students put in governance. That's actually the name of the journal. But they'll put in things like Oxford or Cambridge Press or Sage, things like that. Names of publishers. That's not the idea. I want to show you quickly. If you go to the library webpage, I think I should have gone on Chrome is what I should have done, but I opened up Explorer that's on this computer too. God help us. If you go to the UMass library page and you look something up on Google Scholar. So I'm going to look up on Google Scholar, I'm going to look up campaign finance, US, on Google Scholar. So the question is, what comes up? So I'm looking for an article here. So here's an article from American Politics Quarterly from 1994. But note over here underneath, there's a little tab here called Cite. If I go there, I get citations in various formats. Harvard is the closest one to what I tend to use, which follows APSR format. And it says right there in italics, American Politics Quarterly. That's the journal name. So if you're not sure what the journal name is, you can always check it here. And that's really the way to be sure, as it were. Again, I'm in the Google Scholar section, and all I did was look underneath the article I was looking at, and over here on the right side they have a section called Cite. So I'm going to leave that up anyway because I'll need it for some other things we're talking about. Now this student wrote in governance, which is correct, but it's not italicized. You always italicize the names of journal articles. And although this title up here is correct without quotes, if it's in the body of a piece of writing you're doing, if it's in the text of something you're writing, you put quotes around the names of articles. You don't have to do it though, because this title is in the place of a title on this template. So keywords, if you don't know what a keyword is, you read the article, you look at the things that are in the article that are distinguishing it from just random words. If I was looking this article up, how could I find it? You don't want to duplicate things from the title. So if East Asia was in the title here, I wouldn't use East Asia. But if I wanted to look this article up and I didn't know the name of it, I could look it up with East Asia politics. This is actually kind of a short list. It should have a couple more things in it to help the help the reader understand what's coming at them. There's a section in this template for citations. If you go back to Google Scholar, you'll see this article is cited by 82, this is cited by 323. I don't actually need you to do that. You can just leave that one up. Just skip over it. From 4 keywords to 5 summary is fine. So now we're more into where the rubber is going to meet the road here. So let's go after this. With the summary, it's more than just a quick overview, right? If you look at an article, you can always just look at the abstract, look at the conclusion, but that's something anyone can do. You're going to give it a quick overview. You're going to need just a couple of lines on the summary of what's in the abstract, or yeah, this one does want to come up for me. It's paywall. I'll have to find another article here quickly that I can just get to a random article. I don't really care. JOP, Journal of Politics on JSTOR, that I can get at. Accepting JSTOR's terms for the millionth time. So I look at the article, right? There's an abstract here. I could go read the conclusions, and you should read all of your article. That's the point of the exercise. If you haven't read your articles and if you don't really understand your articles, you won't be able to write about them. But there's more to it than that, because in the section we're working on, in the summary section, you can very quickly explain what the article, summarize what the article's about, a couple of sentences. What you really want to get into is the methodology that was used, and let me explain that. From the time when somebody decided that they want to write an article to the time they send it into the journal and the time it gets actually accepted, they had to do something. They had to create some work that made the article worth reading. So those methods, they could be, very empirical. It could be they did a survey, they ran a laboratory experiment. They could have run a natural experiment in the real world, a field experiment. They could have digested and analyzed a large body of literature. They could have done any number of things. But it's what they did that matters, and that's really what you want to get at in the summary. So when you read your articles, keep asking yourselves, what did this person do to create this article? How did this article, it didn't appear out of thin air. Something had to happen. There has to be some survey data. There has to be some thought that went into it, some analysis. And that's what you want to get at in the summary section. So the person doesn't have to go read the article to figure out what happened. They know because they read your summary. The main findings section. A few things there. Some people tend to overquote. One or two short quotes is fine, but generally you can always condense it down into your own words and make it more efficient in terms of space. Be sure what you have is a finding and not a fact. So if it's a widely known fact, right, the moon orbits the Earth, right, that's a fact. That everyone knows that. The article didn't discover that. You just need to leave that out. But if it's a finding, which would be something like the mean temperature on the surface of the Earth has gone up 1.87 degrees since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, and if that's a finding from the article, that's the kind of thing you're putting in here. Moving along, utility section. One thing is, people tend to lapse into the first person here. This student did. I focus on articles that would explicate the political and economic relationship between East Asia and the Western world. Okay, that's not the voice you want to be writing. You don't want to be in the first person here. You can just as easily say the selected articles explicate political and economic relationships among Asia and the Western world. Between, if it's two things, among, if it's more than two things. I think between East Asia and Western world could arguably be two things, but the Western world is a number of elements in there, so I would go with among, but that's a minor point. More to the point is that you, in the utility section, don't want to be in the first person. I was interested in contrasting and comparing two political structures. That's not the way I want a utility section to be written. What you want to talk about then is how this article is going to play with the other articles and how it advances your agenda in the article that you're writing. So this is a good example of how not to do it on this particular one, although the student did well overall and did a good job with most of their summaries. I'm not happy with that particular section. In terms of the criticism, you want to avoid overly general review types of observations. So the first line here says the analysis was long and detailed enough for the reader to have thorough understanding of the author's argument. That's really not how you want to form your criticism section. The paper was heavily focused on the author's opinions and lacked solid facts and specific examples to support that opinion. That's getting a little bit better, but we want some more specifics in there too. So one thing I'll point out too now as we're looking at these articles, you have to note that this is how we're doing the feedback. So these bubbles give you what's underneath, you know, what the comment is. We'll cross things out. We'll put in little tabs here and there to tell you to move commas around or insert words or delete words. But you're going to get your comments, and this paper is lightly commented, I will say. Mine tends to be much denser. I didn't do this one. But you'll get these comments. So this one says, this criticism is too vague. Note an example of what you purport was the author's opinion rather than fact. That's the kind of comment you're going to get. And sometimes we'll rewrite sections for you. You'll notice in the samples I've provided you, a lot of the sections are actually rewritten end to end. And that's the feedback I keep talking about. In this class, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where you can do some, make some strides in terms of improving your writing. Other criticisms that come up sometimes that aren't terribly useful. A lot of people will say, oh, the article's old. Well, you know, you pick the article. If you pick an article from 2000, don't expect it to not be 17 years out of date. That's on the person picking the article. So claiming that research is out of date is not a valid criticism. All research gets out of date eventually. And another frequent criticism that's not acceptable is the small n criticism. Small n has a place. Obviously, big N, there's more statistical inference you can get from it, but that's not what steers the boat. You know, sometimes there's funding for a pilot project, and that's what the article is about. Sometimes, as long as the people make reasonable statistical inference, small n is fine, or smaller n. You could criticize if somebody took a small n sample and made an unjustifiable statistical inference from it, but that in a peer-reviewed article, that's generally never going to happen. The inferences that get made are going to be in line with the sizes of the samples. So the small n criticism, I've never seen it succeed in any of the summaries I've ever looked at, so avoid that one too. Anyway, those are my notes on this. You kind of got to just jump in and get wet here. You're juniors and a university political science program, you should know how to read an article by now and at least begin to write on this template, and I will then, you know, dive in on the first one, give you back notes, and you can just keep tuning it up till we get to the end where you should be pretty proficient on this stuff. And it may even be a habit you'll want to continue for future classes when you read stuff. Doing a template-driven summary is a great way to keep track of everything that you've been covering. So that's this section of the video lectures. I'll come back with another one shortly, possibly after I've seen the first round of papers. I'll make some specific comments, and typically I find that students as groups tend to always, not always, but will often, people will be making the same mistake. So I'll see what kind of problems I'm having with your papers and your summaries and get back to you on that, probably in another video, probably early next week. All right, great, thanks.